Are you someone who worries about doing deadlifts and whether they might cause you an injury? If so, that's one of the things we're going to cover on today's Q&A session. Other questions I've had in this week are whether deloads in your training program are necessary and what my thoughts are on that. And then what split of exercises is best for you and what the options are there. And then any other questions that you ask me live on this live stream. So my name's Chris, I'm a physiotherapist, and this is your opportunity to ask me any questions that you might have on how to start strength training as an older adult. So please, I welcome you to use this opportunity to use the chat feature if you're watching on YouTube, or you can use a comments feature if you're watching this live on Facebook. And please, there are no stupid questions. Ask anything that you want to answer on. If I can answer it live, I will. If I need to go away, do some research and come back to you, then I'll answer that on a future week. Equally, if you're watching a recording of this, then again, please still use the comments feature. I do come back and check each week, and I'll answer that in a following week's episode, which are always going to be Wednesdays at 12 o'clock. And then if you have been watching these and you found any value, then the only thing I always ask is if you just take a couple of seconds to click the thumbs up button underneath the video. And if you haven't already done so, then just make sure you're subscribed to the Never Too Old to Lift YouTube channel. And you'll be informed when I do more of these live Q&A sessions and then any other videos. So I had another new video up last night if you haven't already seen that one. But for now, I will get started with the first question. So before we come on to deadlifts, I'm going to go on to the two questions that have come in from Maggie. So hi Maggie, thanks again for your questions. So we've got two from you today. Just let me know if you're watching live, and also if anyone else is watching, just let us know where you're watching from. I was always intrigued to know where people are watching this from. But yeah, so Maggie's first question is, hi Chris, could you cover the topic of deloading and whether this is necessary, and if so, how long for and how best to do it? Thanks. So firstly, for anyone who doesn't know, who's watching, what deloading means is, for anyone who's been training for a longer period of time and they're at the point where they're regularly pushing their muscles to the point of fatigue multiple times per week, that fatigue can accumulate and then start to impair the progression that you might be making. So for example, if you do a heavy workout, say, and you really push your squats on a Monday and you come back on the Tuesday and you just equally as heavy session on the Tuesday, you're probably less likely to do as well on the Tuesday as you did on the Monday because you've got the fatigue from the Monday. Now, if this builds over a long period of time, then that can really sort of limit how much progress you're making, and that's where people get stuck in the plateau, because the progression is quite quick at the start and then it plateaus off. And then when you're in that plateau, quite often you feel like you have to push even harder to try and break through it to make a gain, so you fatigue yourself even more. So some people then program into deloading periods of time within their workouts. So that could be anywhere from a few days to a week or so. And that could be a complete deload where there's no training at all. That could be where you reduce the volume and or you reduce intensity. So you might lift, so you could just do less sets, still lifting heavy, or you could lift less heavy and do less sets. And there's a whole combination of that. I'm going to start by saying, Maggie, that I tend to work with a lot of people who are in the beginner stages of lifting weights. So they're in their first year, so they're just getting started, or they know a little bit and they just want to progress slightly. And also working with older adults, particularly if they are in the newer stages, lifting weights isn't something they'd necessarily love to do and it doesn't excite them. They're looking for the bare minimum, or what is the kind of the minimum optimal load that we can do to bring about some positive changes to make you feel like you're doing enough to be able to enjoy an active lifestyle going forward and reduce the risks of sarcopenia and the effects that that might have, as opposed to I'm not really working at the higher end where with kind of either elite athletes or just bodybuilders or people who are 6-7 days in the week because they absolutely love it and they're pushing themselves hard all the time. So the answer for kind of the two groups of people are very different. And I'm probably not the best place to say in terms of that kind of high level performance side of things. There's probably some more nuances to the deloading side of things that you might want to look into further. And I did, in preparation for this, watch another video that was quite really good, which I haven't linked to yet in the description, but I'll add it in the comments at the end of the video today. So look back there, or I'll put it in your comment in the Facebook group later. But in terms of if you're just getting started and you're in the first year of training, then I don't really think deloading is kind of particularly necessary. And I'll come on to a second what I tend to do instead with people. But often you're just getting used to the lifts and the movement patterns and the exercises, and you're getting used to doing a bit with weight, and you're getting used to then pushing to fatigue. And you might do it that higher number of reps before you reduce that down. So that all takes a lot of time. And probably in that time, you're not pushing enough to get the fatigue in, to accumulate enough to need a deload. And then equally, most people I'm working with who are in the beginner stages are kind of suggesting 2 to 3 sessions per week, because that's the minimum of what we need to do to build strength or to meet the physical activity guidelines. And most people then don't do more than 3 because, again, they don't particularly enjoy doing weights. They just want to do enough to be active and enjoy an active lifestyle later on. So if you're having days in between sessions, and then sometimes you might have a week where you might only do 1 session, and then you might come back and do 3 for a few weeks, and if that's the kind of lifter you are and that's the schedule you keep to, then you kind of don't really need to schedule deloads in there, because you've kind of got those mini ones along the way. And you ask, your second question we'll come on to a second, is about whether you were lifting 6 days a week. And if you're doing that for a longer period of time, then after a year or so, you might want to schedule some deloads in. And that could just be a holiday where you're going away and you're not going to put any pressure on doing any weights or anything like that, and that'd be fine. But yeah, and in terms of the beginner stages, what I tend to prefer instead is almost kind of the periodization of training. So what I work on quarters or 12-week blocks within my training, or when I'm training anyone in a clinic. So I'll get someone used to the exercises and we'll work out at 15 repetition max to start with, and then over 12 weeks we'll push down towards 5 repetition max where we're building the weight. And once I've done that for a couple of weeks, I'll then completely change programs, and for the next quarter or 3 months we start a completely different program with new exercises, go back to 15 repetitions, and there's often a couple of weeks of learning the exercises before finding that fatigue point. So that's kind of our deload built in without really having a specified deload. And then we work to 5 repetition max again over 12 weeks, and then I change it again. There's a couple of people where I do the same exercises but for 2 quarters or 6 months. So we spend a bit of time working up to 5 repetition max, and then I keep the exercises the same for them, and then I actually bring the weight down slightly, and we start working down from the 5 repetition max down to kind of 6 repetition, 8 repetitions, back down to 15. So you're kind of, it's a slight deload in the sense you're lifting with less heavy weights, but then you are still pushing to fatigue. But that's another option. But for majority of people who might be watching this or who have followed Never Told to Lift, I would go for the pick one workout program for about 12 weeks, sort of 3 months. Some people go 4 months, and then change everything up, go back to 15 repetition max, back to 5 weeks. And that's probably where I would suggest, Maggie, but again, without it knowing too much about the kind of history behind how much training you've done in the past to get to this point, you might be interested in deloads. But I'll put the link in the comments to another video that's a bit more advanced that you might find interesting. But I hope that kind of answers that. And if anyone's got any follow-on questions from that, please do let me know. whilst we're on your questions, Maggie, I'll come on to your second question. So it was, I'd also be interested on your thoughts on whether an upper lower body split 6 days a week is okay, or whether full body 3 times a week is better. Short answer is I don't think there's one that's better than the other. It's what is better for you. And some of my thought processes I'll go through now in terms of, again, most people who are at the beginner stages are looking to do the bare minimum. So they are looking 3 times a week is the max they're going to go. They might only go 2 days a week. And then you're having rest days in between those days. So for them, I tend to say full body because firstly, if you're new to the gym and you just do one full-on leg session and then you just do one full-on upper body session and then you go back to leg session, all you're doing is leg exercises in that session. And if you're new, that might be too much for your legs in the muscles, the tendons, the joints, etc. You might kind of push over a threshold of how much they can actually tolerate, and you might find you start to get some aches and pains and things that start to occur. Whereas if you're doing 2 leg exercises, a shoulder exercise, a trunk exercise, and you're splitting it, the total time over the whole body, you're less likely to push one specific muscle, tendon, joint, etc. to the point where it's going to become painful or sore, and then you're giving it a day or two to recover before you do it again. So for most people, I would tend to suggest full body 3 times a week is better than pushing just one area and then going on to another one. And also just finding 3 times a week to go to the gym is a lot easier than finding 6 times a week to go to the gym. But however, if you're someone who really enjoys it, you're finding that actually 6 days a week is very achievable for you and you can see yourself doing it long into the future, then you then wouldn't want to do full body ones on 6 days a week, because you're going to need each muscle group to have a day of recovery at some point where you're not pushing to fatigue in that time. So that's where these splits come in. So it could be upper lower body split. So you just do 1 day focus on the legs, 1 day focus on upper body. The other common split pattern is push pull legs. So pretty sort of self-explanatory there. Mainly push-based movement patterns on the push day, mainly pull-based movement patterns on the second day, and then you're just doing mainly leg-based exercises on the third day. And then by the time you go back to the push again, your push muscle groups have had 2 days of recovery because they've not really been utilised on the other 2 days. So they've had their rest despite the fact you've still been going to the gym almost every day. And again, some people find it easier to keep the routine of 6 days a week or even 7 days a week, because if you've only got to go 2 or 3 times a week, you have to choose which days you go on. And sometimes the fact that you've got a choice to whether you go or not, you often choose not, and you think I'll make it up later in the week, and then eventually you run out of days. Whereas if you're going 7 days a week, there isn't a choice. You know you're going, and then when you're there, you're choosing what you do. That's the choice part. Again, the splits tend to work a bit better. So yeah, 6 days a week, certainly okay. If for most people, I would say the full body 3 times a week is better, purely because it's more achievable going into the future. But it sounds like you're someone who, the fact you're even considering the 6 days a week, then if you are going to go 6 days a week and you prefer it, then I would probably go for some form of split. So yeah, say upper body lower or push pull leg day. Good, but again, I hope that answers your questions, Maggie. I know you've said you're watching this live. Yes, I'm watching live from wet and rainy North Shields. So yeah, has that answered your question, or have you got any follow-on questions you'd like to cover from there? We've also got Kim is here as well. So hi, Kim. So hi. It says sorry I'm a bit late, but I'm here. So how are you getting on, Kim? Have you got any other questions that you wanted to go through? And then also got August, who I've done a blog post on in the past. So hi, August. Great to hear from you. So August says, it's good to see you again. I've been following you for the last few years and I've emailed your progress report. I hope this comment finds you. So yes, and I saw your other comments, August. So thank you for the update. I've not had a chance to read it yet, but I have received the email, and so we might even catch up and I'll see if I can do another update on you there. But let's see what we've got next. So just before I move on, if anyone is interested in learning a bit more about strength training as an older adult, I've got a free ebook that you might be interested in. So just go to nevertoldtolift.com/start-here, or you can have a look in the description and you'll find the link, and that's going to help you go through or create your own 12-week strength training program and choose some of the exercise variations that are actually going to work for you and your current ability level or conditions you might have or restrictions you might have. So that will help get you started. And if you're someone who finds reading off a screen difficult and that puts you off, then there is a paperback copy available on Amazon. So just search on Amazon, Never Taught to Lift, and you'll find that there. And that's what the front cover looks like. Good, but let's just hide that. And the last one that I've got prepared that I wanted to go over, this wasn't so much a question but a statement that someone who was in the clinic mentioned to me this week, and we were just going over a bit of a history behind what her training program or just what her exercise in general looks like. And she mentioned that she goes to the gym and she does weights and she goes 3 times a week. She mentioned that she does squats, she does bench press, and the other things that she does do, and then she says, but don't worry, I don't do deadlifts. I know they're not great for me, so I avoid those. And this isn't the first time I've heard that people avoid deadlifts because they're worried about injuring themselves, and it's often seen as this dangerous exercise that we shouldn't be doing. And I just wanted to discuss that a bit more because it's an interesting thing, and there's arguments on both fronts. But from my point of view, the deadlift is a form of hip hinge, is one of the movement patterns involved in strength training, and hip hinging and sort of deadlift type motion is something that we do on a day-to-day basis quite regularly without realising it. Every time we try and go and pick something up from the floor, sometimes we go in a squat motion, but often we just bend at the waist and we do it more in a deadlift motion. And if you're out in the garden, particularly it's starting to get to the weather, we can do a bit more in the garden. You might be lifting heavy plant pot, heavy bag of compost, and we generally do it with a deadlift action, and we're doing it with relatively heavy weights. And if our back isn't prepared for the stress and the strains that will put on our back, it may well cross this threshold where it starts to become angry and sensitive and then cause pains, and then at the worst case scenario cause a bit of an injury. And in the gym, deadlifting, yes, will put more stress and strain on the back than other exercises, but squatting will put more stress through the knee than other exercises, and shoulder press will put more stress through the shoulder than other exercise. And we don't avoid all exercises because we might stress areas of the body. The body is brilliant. It adapts and it evolves. And if we stress areas of the body gradually and progressively, they become more tolerant to those stresses, and we have more robust, resilient joints and tendons and muscles that can deal with all the demands of day-to-day life. And the deadlift in the back is no different from that. So the mistake a lot of people make is that they jump up too quickly with the weights with deadlifts, and rather than sort of progressing slowly, they take a big jump up, and that jump up then pushes them over the threshold of how much they can tolerate, and then it causes a reaction. So just like anything else, particularly if you are starting this as an older adult, we want to make sure that we progress very slowly and make small steps up. And if we do that, particularly with a deadlift, our back will learn to deal with the demands of that deadlift. And then when we're doing it in the gym or day to day outside, when we're lifting that plant pot, your back is going to deal with that, and it's not going to suddenly react and become sore. There is a bit of discussion, and I've mentioned it before, but I'll cover it again now, of how perfect your form has to be in order to avoid injury. And some people doing a deadlift, particularly if you're starting as an older adult, won't quite have the ability to keep a completely straight back as you're doing it. So ideally we want a straight back, and we're really hinging at the hips without much rounding at the back, because in terms of performance, that is the optimal performance to lift a heavier weight. However, if you can't achieve a perfectly straight back, does that mean you shouldn't be doing a deadlift? Because if you're then not doing a deadlift, your back then becomes even weaker, and then that plant pot's more likely to cause a reaction. So I'd rather you do deadlifts with a slightly rounded back, but take the progressions a little bit slower, and your back will learn to deal with the demands and the stresses in that slightly rounded position, and then again become more tolerant of it. And there are even some people who purposely do rounded lifts, so they're called Jefferson curls. So they actually stand on a step with a barbell and they load it up heavy, and they curl from the sort of neck first, and then round the back, and then eventually get to the point where their hands are almost by the feet, and then they kind of round themselves back up again. And again, if they progress very slowly, the back can deal with the demands of a Jefferson curl, and it helps create a more robust back. So that's another option of a movement you can add in there. But my argument to anyone who says deadlifts are dangerous, I don't do them because I'm worried I'm going to injure myself, is if you're not doing them, your back, that's an important movement pattern, your back is going to get weaker in, and if you're not building strength in it, you are going to be losing strength in it. And if you lose strength, at some point you're going to do something day to day that is going to cause you to stress your back, and that could result in an injury if you're not prepared for it. So yeah, if you're worried about deadlifts, just take them a lot slower than maybe some of the other lifts, particularly if you had a bad experience in the past with them. And again, if you're really not worried, you're not sure about them, then go and speak to a personal trainer or have a one-off session with someone to just assess how you're doing them. If there's any, because technically it's one of the more difficult lifts, so it's harder to kind of feel whether you're getting the technique as good as you could be, or if you're feeling it in the right places. So just having someone look at you and give you a few pointers or cues can be really helpful. I mean, if you're in the Birmingham area and you want me to have a look, then you can have a look at my clinic. It's Chris Tiley Physio, and the details are below. Or there's plenty of YouTube videos out there of people describing how to do deadlifts, and someone's description might not really resonate with you, and then you look at another video and suddenly the way they say it and the cueing techniques that they use might actually really be helpful. So, and that clicks with you more than the other person's video does. So watch a few videos as well if you've got any kind of concerns about the deadlift. But for me, I would say add them in to stop injuring yourself in the future, rather than worry about whether the deadlift might injure you. And yes, it could cause a reaction, but we're trying to mitigate the risks there, just like with all the other lifts. So again, be interested to know what people watching, what your thoughts are on deadlifts. Do you include them? Are you scared of them? Let me know there. Kim's got back, said all good, lapsed a bit over Easter, so on week 7, but keeping going. Went to the gym at hotel and did a lot more than home. Easier too, lots more room. So yeah, that's interesting, is when you have your first experience in the gym from having worked out from home, you suddenly realise that there's a lot more equipment there, and a lot of it is a bit more specific to what you might be trying to achieve. And now that you've got the confidence of doing the workouts, and then not everything's new to you, it's just the environment that's new to you, you can step into a gym environment and just work with your program that you're confident with, and then suddenly the gym's a lot less of a scary place. And you're not the first person who said that, Kim, that they never thought they'd go back to the gym. They always thought they'd carry on just doing this from home. And actually, once you've got started and had your first stepped into the gym and tried it, you actually get hooked on it a little bit. So you might well find that you'll end up seeking out a gym at home, and the stuff at home was just a good stepping point to get you to that point. So it'd be interesting to see whether that's something you've looked or thought about. Good. So for anyone who's watching, this is your last chance to ask any questions, because that is the kind of last one that I'd prepared. I just wanted to mention one more thing that some of you might be interested in. So again, I mentioned I've got a clinic in Harborne in the Birmingham area. next Saturday, so the 13th of April at 10 a.m, I'm going to be doing a in-person talk. So it's strength training as an older adult. So I'm going to just guide through a bit of the theory about why we should be doing strength training, what some of the exercises you might bring in, some of the theory you need in order to actually make sure you're building strength and not just going through the motions without actually building strength. And then a chance to ask any questions and go through things from there. So that, again, Saturday 13th of April at 10 a.m. It is something you have to sign up for on Eventbrite, so there's only spaces for 15 people. So if you are interested there, you do have to register. The link is below. It's completely free to register, but you can't just turn up without registering first. And then I think that's it. So Kim says, yes, definitely we'll look into a gym after summer. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy that. Good. So I'll be back here at 12 o'clock next Wednesday. If you're watching the replay of this and you've got any questions or any follow-up questions from what I've talked about there, then again, do make sure that you use the comments feature or send me an email. So it's chris at nevertooldtolift.com. So that's chris@nevertooldtolift.com, and I'll be more than answer your questions on the next Q&A session. But hopefully you all can have a good week, and I'll see you next week.